So now going into round 2, you can see we've got Extirp 7 up against Joyous 18, Mons against Luke AP, and Debris Field against Splinter. So let's go ahead and get this round started. And next up, first up for round 2, we have Extirp 7 against Joyous. Let's go ahead and get this going. Now you can see last time Joyous basically lost a DPS race. Extirp 7's fleet isn't particularly DPS racy, but one of the big differences between the two is that Joyous is relying on the hard shield here. Now the hard shield you can see stays a consistent size, but once it takes enough damage, it just disappears for a few seconds while it has to recharge. Whereas the soft shields that Extirp 7 is using and that Joyous is using on definitely not the balls is they don't disappear in the same way, they just kind of shrink. Now the advantage to hard shields, of course, then is that it protects the modules better while it's alive. And that's kind of what you're seeing. Joyous needed to protect these guns as best he could, but I'm assuming there was a bit of a budget issue, and so he only went with the one shield. But a pretty solid showing here from Joyous's fleet. Well done. Next up we have my filler fleet up against Luke's fleet. Now, Luke's fleet in the past scored a lot of points by shooting ships in unprotected angles, namely from the side and the back, which it can do here, but as we just saw, these large missiles hit hard enough that they are just punching through the forward shields that I'm using. I don't have an abundance of point defense, but what little point defense I do have, you can see, is pretty ineffective against these large missiles. However, because I've got a bunch of ships, they're doing a very good job of cleaning up these flanks pretty quickly. Really solid bursts out of the bomber. I'm kind of wondering if Laps's fleet would have been better with two of the bombers instead of the bomber and the droner. But you can see though the droner also does have more shields. I think it's intended to mostly be a diversion so that ships turn their back and expose their back to the bomber. I think Laps was expecting a lot of ships to have a lot of forward defenses and not necessarily a lot of reverse ones. These two ships getting stuck on each other a little bit though. That's not ideal for Laps. And the chain guns arrive. But as you can see, Laps's ships are very fast and have no problem disengaging. A fairly close match between the two on the scoreboard, but I think over the next minute we're going to find out that this wasn't very close at all. As Laps's fleet plays its favorite game, a little bit of ring around the rosy. Chain guns ripping in here though, a few of the shots going around the shields, but most of them being pretty well absorbed by said shields. But that is a lot of little ships with a lot of chain guns. And it looks like the drone fighter may be down. And so, in just a couple of seconds, this match turned around. And looks like we have a bit of a physics fling. That works out really well for my fleet though. It's all those missiles chasing a ship that's basically already dead. And the tourney filler takes the round. Next up we have Debris Field against Splinterman. So this is a very DPS racy sort of battle. With Splinter's fleet, you can see he's positioned so that he actually started with enemies in artillery range. but all of his early ammunition is getting dumped into those distractor hexagons. The primary hexagon, you can see, is trying to dig through those shields, and I think it is making progress, but that is a lot of shields for it to have to go through. Meanwhile, the giant rail artillery from Splinter making a big chunk of progress every time it fires. This is a nasty little ship Splinter built for us, which, if you're familiar with similar games, Splinterman has a bit of a legacy of building nasty ships, so much so that he has been described as the boss fight. And then he actually built the boss fight. That was a pretty good event. But the round goes very decisively. Not a single point scored by Debris' fleet. That is impressive.